Picture this. You're scrolling through Instagram and you see that someone you know went and visited the Mona Lisa, and so they made a post about it. And all the comments are saying that's amazing, that's wonderful, that is such a unique experience. And even yourself, you think that too, because that is so cool. And so put that scenario aside. As soon as I said Mona Lisa, you probably have a general idea in your head of what it looks like. It probably came up automatically. And that is because it's all around us. You probably saw it in school at a textbook. You've seen it in postcards, in tote bags, shirts, jewelry. It's all around us. And so why is it so special if we all know what this painting looks like when someone goes to a museum to see it face to face? Like, honestly, what difference does that make? Like, yes, it is the original, but what does the original even mean? And why do we find so much value in it? And also, what does art even have to do with society as a whole? Like, what can it contribute to it? And we're going to be discussing this in today's episode of Philosophically, where we talk about art through a philosophical lens. And the painting that we will be discussing today is not the Mona Lisa, but it is the Stonebreakers by Gustav Courbet. And we're going to be talking about the aura and critique of it. Two different concepts from two different thinkers, Walter Benjamin and Chantal Mouffe. In the first segment, I'll describe the painting The Stonebreaker so that we can all have a bit of background about it and understand what we're talking about, and we can visualize the painting as we discuss further on. On the second segment, we'll move on to Walter Benjamin's thoughts about the aura of an artwork and how we can apply it in this scenario. On the third segment, we will do the same for Chantal Mouffe, focusing on her views about art and politics. And finally, on the fourth segment, you will be able to call in with your own questions or opinions so that we can finalize this discussion. So let's get started. So you know how in social media, people tend to portray the best version of their life, all their highlights and good moments, which is actually a good thing. Like, those are all good things. But from someone looking at it from the outside, it can seem as if that is all there is to life, and that no one has any problems, and that no one struggles. And that can actually be so toxic because it creates unreal expectations. And this is what was going on in the 19th century and the reasoning behind the movement realism. Because before this, all of the artwork available in society, due to previous movements such as Romanticism, would portray an idealized version of society. And even though this would produce very beautiful artwork with vibrant colors and a happy lens to it, it could actually be a detrimental thing for those people in society that were struggling and that were not being recognized. And so Gustav Courbet, the first artist to participate in realism, aimed to show the reality of the situation and say things as they are, without any sugarcoating. And so his painting The Stonebreakers is a great example of this. You can see in the painting two stonebreakers and the harsh reality that these people would face in their manual labor. You can see the clothes of the two men that are working in this. It's possibly a father and son, but the background, you can just see very dull colors, so your attention is very driven to the work that they are doing. And you see their clothes are ripped. You see that this is not a good environment. It's not a fun environment. And so Gustav Courbet was trying to portray the reality of their situation and to critique society. But we will talk about that later. So now let's go to Walter Benjamin. In his work, The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, Walter Benjamin states, "Even the most perfect reproduction of a work of art is lacking in one element, its presence in time and space, its unique existence at the place where it happens to be." When Benjamin is talking about the aura in art, he's referring to the unique and authentic presence of an original artwork. It is that special quality that makes experiencing an original artwork very different than when you encounter multiple copies. This, he claims, is diminished when the artwork is reproduced or mass-produced. So imagine that you're getting ready for a night out, you look at yourself in the mirror, and you're feeling great about yourself, about your appearance, and so you ask a friend to take a picture of you. And your friend pulls out her very high-quality iPhone camera and takes it. But when you look at the picture, you start noticing all of these imperfections and details that you didn't even see in the mirror and can't even notice in real life. And you don't like the picture. Even though you haven't changed, that photo brought to light a whole new perspective. So when we think about art, even though an original painting doesn't change, its reproduction does bring out a new perspective and highlights new details that the artist probably didn't intend. Because when that artist was painting his painting, all he had to work with was what he had in front of him and available to his naked eye. Every decision that he made about that painting was in his real life lens. Reproductions cannot capture fully the artist's intention, and so the aura and authenticity of an artwork is lost the more that it is reproduced. Think back to the Mona Lisa example. Wanting to see the original is only because of all the many reproductions you've seen. It is not because it is seen as something of value. So now it is simply the original of the reproduction. This gives us little time to think about the actual meaning of the painting, which leads us to another important idea of Benjamin, which is that paintings are not made to be seen by the masses collectively, because the personal connection that you once had with the artwork can now be influenced by the widespread opinions of a larger audience. Benjamin connects this to film, and he even says, the reactionary attitude towards a Picasso painting changes it into the progressive reaction towards a Chaplin movie. So think of a comedy show that you like, such as Friends. It actually became a trend on TikTok where people started posting clips of the show but without the laughing track. And when you're watching that, you realize that most of the jokes are not funny. They're actually kind of awkward and even creepy. But why is it that we find it so funny when we're watching the show on Netflix with the laughing track? It's only because we hear other people and we can visualize other people's reactions to the show that validates us finding funny and even peer pressures us into laughing. And it does feel funny in the moment, but our whole perception of what we're viewing has been changed. So, Benjamin, let's think about that example in this passage that Benjamin says. With regard to the screen, the critical and the receptive attitudes of the public coincide. The decisive reason for this is that individual reactions are predetermined by the mass audience response they are about to produce, and this is nowhere more pronounced than in film. The moment these responses become manifest, they control each other. So, reproduction democratizes art and makes it available to such a larger audience, which should be a good thing. But it also causes the aura of an artwork to be shattered, since we now see it simply as entertainment. And paintings are just not made for that. They are not made to be simply seen and reacted to, not made to be seen by large groups of people at a time. They are meant to be thought about. Taking the aura away from an art form involves a destruction of how we're meant to perceive it. So even now in social media, TikTok, Instagram, everything that we see, we can visualize if everyone likes it or not, with the number of likes it receives or the comments of people commenting about it. And even if we're not aware of it, it does change our perception of how we approach a video, a picture, a photo, and even art. So allowing it to be distributed among the masses, yes, makes art more accessible to a broader audience, but it completely alters the way we interact with it. Art loses its meaning and purpose. Its purpose is now simply to be distributed. And that is what Walter Benjamin argues for. When applying Benjamin's ideas to the Stonebreakers, I believe he would say that while its reproduction allows us to talk more about it and the issues that were happening at the time, engaging in conversation about people's struggles in society. I mean, that is the reason why we're able to talk about it today on this podcast. But he would still warn us when approaching this painting to not let other people's opinions about it dictate our own. He would encourage us to put aside our preconceptions about the painting that we would receive from the masses and instead approach the painting individually, of course, with knowledge of its context and history, and reach our own conclusions. Also, this painting was originally destroyed, so there's currently no original available for us to see, which for Benjamin would mean its aura is completely lost too, and we can no longer engage with it fully 100%, since the artist's original touch and therefore original intentions can no longer be seen. Nothing can ever be as authentic as the original painting of the Stonebreakers, and sadly we can never gain that back. But we can still take away from Benjamin, when looking at this painting, that the historical context is important and should be at the front of our minds when engaging with this painting. It should encourage us to question and challenge the norms of society at the time and make connections. But Chantal Mouffe will have lots to say about that, so let's move on. Before we can talk about Chantal's views about art, we first have to understand her political views. Mouffe argues for an agonistic approach to democracy, which basically means embracing conflict as a natural and positive aspect of political life. According to her, democratic societies should encourage the existence of multiple political perspectives and allow for the expression of conflicting ideas without trying to eliminate them. This would be the opposite to a consensus-based model in which the goal would be to reach unanimous agreement. One way in which we can see the issue of a consensus-based model is through the current polarization of politics that we see portrayed every day through social media, and algorithms are such a good example of this. So for me, on my YouTube, I am currently on a completely different side of the political spectrum than on my TikTok, and so my algorithms show me all the time opposing sides of the same debates. And I can see how when someone is stuck on only one algorithm across all of their platforms and they're only receiving information that is tailored to them and their own views, the consensus-based model ends up even creating more conflict and separation in society because it's not allowing them exposure to other perspectives, and they don't end up welcoming them because they don't have enough information about it. And by looking at both sides, I can definitely see why it is essential to embrace conflict as a natural part of political life. But anyways, now that we have a bit of a background about her political views, we will see how her perspective on art is intertwined with her political philosophy. She states in Art and Democracy that there is an aesthetic dimension in the political and a political dimension in art. So here we can see her views come together, and particularly through her ideas on agonism and the need of recognizing the inherently political nature of all artistic expression. She encourages a critical engagement with art that goes beyond mere aesthetics and challenges existing power structures, providing a lens through which to view the intersection of art, politics, and society as a whole. In her view, art is a way to disrupt the current hegemony, and artists act as activists in challenging the dominant ideology. So now we move from aura to the critique part of this podcast when considering the Stonebreakers painting. And I believe Mouffe would argue that the artist is disrupting the current hegemony, with the artist serving as an activist for those people who deviate from the norm that the political sphere is trying to portray. So as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, this painting portrays a reality that would not otherwise be discussed in the cultural or political sphere or would be romanticized. And so this aligns with the perspective of the need for art to push boundaries and contribute to the creation of alternative perspectives. The Stonebreaker serves to question and challenge existing power structures and societal norms by shining a light on the reality lived by the Stonebreakers and potentially many other members of the working class at the time. In this final segment of the podcast, one of you gets to call in right now to ask a question and finalize this discussion. You can call in now. Hello, welcome. What is your question?
Hello. I was just wondering, how do you think that Chantal Mouffe and Benjamin Walker's ideas could come together or relate in terms of analyzing the painting?
Thank you so much. That is such an amazing question. And I would start with Chantal's encouragement to view art critically rather than merely aesthetic. I would connect that to how Benjamin emphasizes the need to know the context of an artwork, especially in the age of mechanical reproduction, where a concept of art is so fast-paced in a way, and we don't have time to stop and think about the meaning of art anymore. I think both thinkers would definitely agree that we should not hold that approach to art, because art is not meant to be merely looked at, it is meant to be thought about. And they would both agree that art has a purpose. As Chantal states that all art is either challenging or supporting the norms, we have to keep this in mind when we're approaching the painting. So definitely we can see this in the Stonebreakers, how it does challenge the norms, and both thinkers provide for us in a way a basis for how to approach it. Even if its aura is lost, we still hold that understanding. And their ideas, although they may have different focuses, they end up coinciding in this way, and they can aid us in this individual journey towards understanding artworks. And with that, we conclude today's episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.